Hi, everyone. I think we will get started. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking for, it's on my screen here. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so thank you for joining us. And I'd like to welcome Erin Howell from GW's Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities to talk about academic integrity issues at GW in 2023. And so, Erin, I don't know if you have slides or if you want to start by talking, but I also would like to have everyone to feel free asking questions and making this conversational if possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Lori. Good afternoon,
Thanks.
everybody. My name is Erin Howell. I use he, him, his pronouns. I serve as the Assistant Director in Student Rights and Responsibilities here at GW. As Lori just mentioned, I do have some slides for us today. I'm going to spend a good amount of time talking about how and why to report violations to my office. And then we'll also spend some time talking about resources, promoting academic integrity, and other things as well. As questions come up, please feel free to unmute or drop them in the chat. There'll be time as well for questions at the end. So thank you all so much for having me today. I will go ahead and start sharing my screen really quick. Okay, can you all see the right screen without notes, or do y'all see notes?
We're see notes.
Oh, okay, so we don't want that. Let me try that again. I recently got a tri-monitor situation going. So still learning how to do that appropriately. Okay, now we see a screen without notes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all so much for working through that with me. I appreciate that. To talk a little bit about student rights and responsibilities before we get started, Student Rights and Responsibilities manages most reports of student misconduct here at the institution. And as we mentioned today, we're going to spend some time, well, all of our time talking about academic integrity violations and how and why to report those to SRR. To also give a preface, our work is grounded in restorative justice and restorative principles. To emulate that, anytime my office is asked to come give a presentation or to give a talk, we start with giving a land and labor acknowledgement. So I'm going to read what's on our screen right now. GW's campuses in the District of Columbia border the confluence of the Anacostia and Potomac Rivers, a historic center of trade and cultural exchange between several tribal nations. For generations, the Piscataway and Anacostian peoples have resided in this region and served as stewards of the local land and waterways. Following European genocide and other harms that continue today, the Piscataway people continue to call this region home, honoring and celebrating their culture and their relationship with the land. Further, we acknowledge that much of what we know of the United States and GW today, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans, their descendants, and their ascendants who suffered the horror of the transatlantic trafficking of their people, chattel slavery, Jim Crow, and other harms that continue today. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we must acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today. Let me pause and say thank you all for letting me engage in that. To offer some reasons why we give these acknowledgements, first, historically and currently harmed and oppressed communities have requested this acknowledgement, and leaders in those communities have requested this acknowledgement, and we wish to honor that. Restorative principles, as I mentioned, are important to our work, and identifying and acknowledging harm is the first step of any restorative process. While these acknowledgements are important, we also understand that they are insufficient to repairing the harm which I just named, which continues to occur. To take further action to acknowledge and repair these historical harms, our office is continuing to learn more about this, and you can engage with us on how we are doing that with resources on our website. To dive into our content really quickly about first why to report academic integrity violations centrally to an office like mine. This may seem obvious to some of you. Perhaps you report academic integrity violations because you believe that integrity of knowledge and learning is central to the university and its mission. Perhaps you do it because the Code of Academic Integrity tells you to do so and encourages you to do so. Those are important and valid reasons. I also want to share, though, these three that I think are more concrete to the daily experience of academic integrity and our work as educators. First, research is clear that when students believe that faculty will report violations, frequency of violations actually decrease. Here it is important to note that the outcomes of those matters don't have to be severe to have an impact. Consistency is more important than severity in this context. Second, reporting centrally to student rights and responsibilities increases the likelihood that we will connect reports of repeat violations across programs. Repeat violations are rare, and taking those rare instances seriously is an important step to upholding the academic integrity of the university. Third, the Code of Academic Integrity is a process designed to create fairness for all involved. Using this process protects you all as instructors against accusation of unfair treatment, bias, or retaliation. Sometimes when faculty have attempted to resolve cases without incorporating this process or resolving things in-house, air quotes around that, students have reported feeling coerced and deprived of their right to engage in the process. Reporting formally also provides the responding student with an impartial process to respond, preserving their fundamental fairness. Finally, by reporting, you increase equitable access to the learning environment for all students by making sure that students use resources more fairly. I'm now going to get into how to report violations to SRR. I'm going to give two examples here, as this might vary depending upon the course, the instructor, and the nature of the violation. But first, let's imagine a student is taking a scheduled exam in a class session, and that can be either virtually or in person. Presumably, you might want to intervene, stop the violation, and address this with the student immediately. That is completely fine, and our website offers suggestions on how instructors can have this conversation. The academic integrity process encourages you to propose a sanction, but we ask that you please do not do that at this stage right now. The reason I discourage you from discussing a sanction at this point with the student is because you likely don't know if that student has any prior violations. If a student has prior violations, that is typically a significant factor in sanctioning. To find that out, please contact our office, either via email, which is rights@gwu.edu, or our phone number. We can discuss the student's history with you and help you consider what appropriate sanction to propose. After that, you can complete the Charge of Academic Dishonesty form, or CAD form for short. This is available on our website as well, and our homepage is studentconduct.gwu.edu. I'll say more about this in a moment, but for those of you who might have had to work through the PDF or hard copy form, we have now moved to an online format that is a lot easier to manage on our end. After you filled out that form, you can then discuss the allegation more formally with the student, including a discussion of the proposed sanction. In that meeting, the student can either contest or accept responsibility for the allegation and or the recommended sanction. Before I talk about that process, I want to outline another possible pathway to reporting based on a different type of incident. So as I mentioned, for the second example, in this scenario, let's imagine you become aware of a violation while you're grading a written assignment. You can't intervene to stop it, and you might not be able to or want to contact the student right away. In this scenario, you might want to find, or you might find it more effective to check priors with our office before discussing the matter with the student, and that's completely fine. You could even complete the CAD form ahead of your meeting with the student and share it with them via the electronic format if you would like, also during that conversation that you have with the student. Then you could discuss the allegation and sanction with the student. In this scenario, you probably have less information about the alleged or perceived violation than you did in the earlier incident. So this meeting would also be important time to learn more about the student's perspective on this matter. Depending upon the circumstances, you might use either one of these or even some different order of events that we've mentioned to report the academic integrity violation to SRR. What's very important here to remember is that you should please check with us if the student has any prior violations when proposing a sanction for the current matter. In a moment, I'll move on to some frequently asked questions about the process, but I want to note a few other resources on our website. I think the first is the most valuable. It provides text you can adapt for your syllabi and an integrity pledge to use on graded assignments. It also provides a tool you can use to clarify which resources are permitted, prohibited, or permitted with attribution on any given assignment. And to emulate this really quick, I'm going to actually go over to our website. Just to go over that. So if you scroll down on this page, going to academic integrity and then promoting academic integrity, scrolling down, you'll find a guide to clarifying academic integrity expectations. This is in really two formats. One, just the table that's on our screen lists different resources. For some obvious reasons, ChatGPT or other artificial intelligence has become the first listed resource. And then from there, the other columns, as I just mentioned, say permitted with citation or other criteria, and then flat out prohibited. How you all can tweak this for your individual syllabi or assignments is by clicking this link right here. This is a Word document copy of this, where you can then insert what resource, and then either a check mark or an X if it's permitted with citation or condition, and then or prohibited. We also have resources on online academic integrity, including instructional resources you can incorporate into online spaces like Blackboard. And then also there are some resources on specifically preparing for an academic integrity panel hearing, as well as considerations and sanctioning. All of these resources will help you promote academic integrity in your course to hopefully prevent violations. The last two I want to highlight as well here will be helpful if you are obviously reporting a violation to SRR. To get into some frequently asked questions now, a common one that I've gotten recently, and we'll get into more traditional ones in just a second, are can cases go across semesters? The answer to that is yes, especially if those cases are reported towards the end of a semester. And then from there, the question comes up of what to do with grades. Our current guidance in conjunction with the Office of the Registrar is to leave that grade blank while the process is pending. And we offer that guidance for two main reasons. One, to not give the perception to the responding student that they've been found responsible or sanctioned before the end of the process or while the process is pending. And then also to not ask you all as instructors to do potentially double work of inserting a grade and then having to potentially go back and change that grade via a grade change form if the outcome of the process is different than the one you originally recommended. To go back to timelines, the Code of Academic Integrity does not offer a quote unquote statute of limitations, either on when a violation happens to when it is reported to SRR, and then moving forward from when it is reported to when it actually gets resolved. The code does offer some guidance that says cases should be resolved as expeditiously as possible. And then also there is some guidance of instructors hopefully being able to report the violation within about 10 business days or 2 weeks from when they become aware of a violation. To talk about the process of scheduling academic integrity panels, this is either when a student contests the allegation itself or the recommended outcome, or that recommended outcome includes separation from the institution, which we'll talk potentially more about that in just a second. Panels are comprised of 5 people total, or 5 panelists total. That does not include you as the reporting instructor, the responding student, and a staff member from my office. But the 5 panelists are comprised of members of our University Integrity Conduct Council, or UICC for short. The makeup of that is 3 students and 2 faculty members. There is an option for ad hoc panels, meaning we can do any combination thereof of at least one student and one faculty panelist. That is a way to get a panel scheduled potentially sooner, specifically over a summer term, when people's variability tends to vary a little bit more so than a traditional academic year. The caveat with ad hoc panels is both the reporting instructor and the responding student have to agree to move forward with an ad hoc panel. If you would be interested in serving as a member of the University Integrity Conduct Council, please reach out to us. We would love to have more faculty representation. Specifically, if you also have any graduate students who you believe would be good, we would also appreciate that representation. Please reach out to us if you would be interested in that, especially for those affiliated with the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. I believe there are, I would say, about 4 or 5 total across SMHS panelists who are currently serving on the UICC. So more representation for this academic unit would be great. So another frequently asked question. Previously, faculty raised concerns about reporting because they were afraid that this would potentially be a permanent record for a student. Under a recent revision of the code, I believe 2 years ago, this went into effect that is no longer the case. Most outcomes that are achieved through this process are what we call archived at graduation. And the only permanent records we maintain are expulsion records, which I've been at GW coming up on 2 years now, and that has not been an outcome administered in my time here in this 2-year tenure. We have also applied these new standards retroactively, where they can be more forgiving for the student, again, to emulate restorative principles, as I mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation today. As I mentioned as well previously, faculty had to print out a charge of academic dishonesty form and then either send that via campus mail or scan it and then send it via email to my office. As of July 1st, 2021, we have updated that to an electronic format. Again, that's a lot more user-friendly for both, I believe, you all on your end, as well as the back end of SRR. More information about reporting, as well as how to report, again, can be found on our website. So do I have to report academic integrity violations? We understand that sometimes instructors want to resolve violations privately between themselves and the student. The Code of Academic Integrity does prohibit this for reasons we've discussed already. When faculty don't go through this process, we have sometimes had to revisit those decisions. That has previously been challenging for all involved, the reporting instructor and the student. So the code does require everyone to report incidents to go through the process if you become aware of a violation and want to impose or recommend a sanction. Do I have to speak with the student about the alleged violation? For a variety of reasons, instructors are sometimes hesitant to speak with students about these matters. I strongly recommend that you do so. That is highly encouraged, but not required of you. Our team can help you think about how to structure this conversation as well. There are resources on our website about how to have this conversation, as I mentioned as well. These conversations, though, have been important turning points in cases for students to learn about academic integrity and for instructors to gather more information on what happened. Also, in these conversations, students have made important disclosures about concerns like food insecurity, mental health, and other issues that they might be experiencing. Those disclosures have helped us provide students with appropriate and effective resources as well on our end. So having that conversation can be really, really impactful, and then letting us know about that as well. We greatly appreciate that. How do I know what sanctions to assign if I'm reporting an alleged violation? The Code of Academic Integrity, as well as our website, have recommended sanction outcomes. There is some more robust guidance on sanctioning guidance in the Code of Academic Integrity. That is guidance, as I mentioned, that is not as hard fast. You must follow this for a first time violation or a second time violation, and so on and so forth. Also, in every case that is reported to SRR, that matter is assigned a case manager, and that person can also be a resource for you if you would like to think of something outside the traditional typical sanction suggestions that I just mentioned that are outlined in the code. Before moving on, I first want to thank everyone for their time. I also want to highlight some additional sessions and briefings we're offering for faculty and instructors. All of these are designed to support instructors as well as academic administrators and their role regarding academic integrity and other behavioral issues in varied learning environments. I hope you'll share these widely with others. We can also offer a specialized session for a particular group if that is of interest. Please reach out to us if that is of interest. At any time, we can chat via email, via phone, and we are also still on social media. I don't believe I included that right here on the screen. But as I've mentioned a few times, you'll find a lot of resources and information on our website if you would like to peruse that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Again, I want to thank everyone for their time and open up the floor for any questions, conversations, or anything you all would like to chat about further.
Thank you, Erin. And I really want to encourage everyone to bring your questions, thoughts, opinions, concerns, and share them with the group.
Hi, Erin, how are you?
I'm doing well, Sarah. How are you?
I just had a question. So let's say that we want to do a warning, but prior to go ahead and doing a report with your office. Is there a way that we can do that so that we can use that as evidence prior, or would that not be able to be used if we then end up writing them up later?
So that's a really great question. And I have a very long-winded and nuanced answer. So if at any point there are follow-up questions from anybody, please feel free to interrupt where I currently am in my long-winded answer. So in this process, as I mentioned, if you do want a sanction assigned, then it is required to go through this process just to uphold fundamental fairness to the student, as well as to protect you as instructors, again, from those claims of potential bias or retaliation or anything like that. With that, we don't want to step on instructors' toes to have that educational conversation, an educational relationship between instructor and student. That is very valuable and important, and my office wants to honor and respect that as much as possible, while also upholding the rights of the student, right? In addition to what I've shared thus far, a new thing that just got added to the Code of Academic Integrity this year that went effective August 15th, 2023 is a warning process where you all, again, as the reporting instructor, have the onus to recommend that as the outcome. A warning through this process does not constitute an official academic integrity behavioral record with my office. That constitutes what we call an administrative record with my office, where SR maintains that this happened, but that record is not subject to a typical disclosure to third parties, even if the respondent consents to that being released to that third party. Recognizing I kind of went down a rabbit hole of records and record maintenance in SRR, I will say that is some of the most nuanced work my office engages in. Did that create a follow-up question specifically? Sarah, I'm looking at you.
If we did a warning, yes, if we did the warning, would the student be made aware of that?
So that's a great question. So if that is reported to SRR and the warning is the recommended outcome on the form that you all fill out, then yes, we would then send the student a letter saying, we've received this form and your instructor has recommended a warning. Here's what that means, as I just explained. This matter is now closed and no further action is required on you, the student.
Got it. Thank you.
That was a great question. Again, recognizing I went down some rabbit holes there. Did that anything in there create any follow-up questions for anybody? Not just Sarah. Thank you so much for that question, Sarah.
I have a question. I'm not sure that it's as a follow-up, but kind of just a different subject. So if someone has an academic infraction and then at the time of graduation, I guess, would you call that as it's expunged or what is it? I mean, it goes away. Then do they have to report that, like because I'm kind of in the pre-med world and, through AMCAS and such, I mean, there's a question like, have you ever been found, I guess, guilty of any kind of academic infraction, and do they have to answer yes? I mean, if it's been expunged, do you know the sort of the rules on that?
So that's a really, really great question. Thank you so much for that, Bart. I appreciate that. So that is also a very nuanced answer. So if at any point there are follow-up questions while I'm talking, please feel free to interrupt me. As I said just a second ago, record retention and maintenance is some of the most nuanced work my office engages in. So with that, when a record becomes administratively archived or expunged, that's a common phrase as well. So thank you for making that kind of corollary there. When a record is administratively archived, that means that record is not subject to a typical disclosure when we get those requests, even with the student's consent. Now, not typical is kind of very generic language, right? With that, what information my office releases on a given request is really dependent upon how the question is posed. So depending upon what question is posed, will then dictate what information my office will release, even when the record is archived. For some more extensive like background checks, that is required of us to release some more information potentially, right? With that, to get to the second part of your question of what might a student be required to disclose on their end, we encourage students to be as ethical and honest as possible in any situation they put themselves in. We're not going to tell them a yes or no if their record has been administratively archived. That is a decision that we encourage them to make themselves, again, in the most ethically centered fashion that they can. Additionally, I don't think you asked this as a part of your question, but you mentioned being part of like pre-med and professional schools and accreditation, things like that. There is a line in the code that says, you all, certain administrators in SMHS, for professional like standard reasons, also have the right to maintain records that you all might be privy to, given those requirements of that professional program or accrediting agency or what have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, that was a really long-winded answer. Did that get to the question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Awesome.
And Aaron, maybe somewhat related, but there's a question in the chat about any additional specific considerations regarding for SMHS in particular. And Jennifer, I don't know if you had an example or something particular in mind that you'd like to expand on, but Aaron, I don't know if you're aware of anything else that is specific to SMHS.
I think something I definitely wanted to get at if I hadn't to already, but I thankfully just did, about accrediting agencies or professional professional requirements. I definitely wanted to mention that if I didn't get to, but I can't think of anything other than that. And thank you, Jennifer, for clarifying. I was going to ask if you had an example. That would probably be very helpful for me. But other than also mentioning involvement with my office of being a member of the University Integrity Conduct Council, I think that would be all I would say specifically related to SMHS. Joyce, please go ahead. Thank you for raising your hand.
Hi, Aaron. Yes. So I'm wondering if you can share any, of course, maintaining the appropriate confidentiality, any AI plagiarism kinds of issues that may have come to your office, generally, if there's any tips regarding best practice that would have emerged from that. And I hear you as the a priori that it has to be explicitly indicated that you shouldn't, that you can't use it if that was indeed the case. But I think that's something we're struggling with, both identifying it in a way that's that is defensible and how to manage it from there. So if you have any tips for us, I'm sure we'd be glad to hear that.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Joyce. I greatly appreciate that. I will say as I'm sure you all are in a similar boat, still learning a lot of context and learning more about generative artificial intelligence and ChatGPT specifically. I think this has become a ubiquitous conversation amongst higher education professionals and circles. With that, I will say, in conjunction with SRR, there are a bunch of colleagues from across the institution who are also engaging in these types of conversations. I think libraries and academic innovation is spending some intentional time engaging in these types of conversations with instructors and how to support instructors through this new paradigm. I'm going to call it paradigm to say the least. In addition to that, I just dropped a link in the chat. Oh, that didn't really do what I want it to do. I hope that link actually works. I have this starred in my Gmail. Of last semester, the Office of the Provost released guidelines for using generative artificial intelligence at the university. So oh, thank you for that, Lauren. Thank you all so much for confirming that that worked. It just didn't look right in the chat. But the Office of the Provost released this guidance late in the spring term last semester, stating some of the resources that we've already talked about on SRR's website, but just as well, just more broadly speaking, the university is not taking a flat out prohibitive stance on the use of generative artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. With that, we do want to be supportive as much as we can to instructors, again, in this new paradigm of how to incorporate it in their classrooms and how to use it in an ethical fashion rather than an ethically dubious way of cutting a corner. But how can we scaffold this into some of our conversations that we might be having in class, and how are we using that to support students' learning and growth and critical thinking skills rather than having the GAI service do that for them? So with that, something that's named in this document that I just linked in the chat is what we talked about a minute ago of clarifying guidelines to academic integrity that we mentioned on my office's website, where you all as the instructors of the course can determine what is authorized to use in your course, what is authorized under certain conditions like a citation or something else, or flat out prohibited. That can be, again, for your course in general or for a specific assignment. With that, to kind of get to another point in your question, Joyce, about if you do suspect a student for using these services in an unauthorized or ethically dubious fashion, please do report it to my office as you see fit. We encourage, again, as I mentioned, just from the presentation of you all having a conversation with the student as well. I will say with the insurgence as well of detection services for the use of generative artificial intelligence services, if y'all have saw this in articles and other spaces, those services are not as reliable as maybe what they are positioned to be, depending upon which service you're using. If you use one service, you'll get a response that says, this was 100% artificially intelligence created. And then putting the same exact content in a different one, you might get a different result saying this was 0% created by artificial intelligence. So with that, if you do suspect a student, we ask that there potentially be more inculpatory information, if there is any available, rather than just solely relying on the use of an AI detection service. In that sense, if applicable, if the student has submitted any previous writing materials, we ask that you potentially compare the student's previously written assignments to what you might suspect the student used an AI service on, as seeing the discrepancies in syntax and punctuation, as well as citations. A common thing of detecting AI use is potentially the creation of fake or inaccurate citations within a paper, if you all have experienced that in the last year. I believe that is still a thing. So if you all, again, being the content experts that you all in your field, see a citation or a source that raises some suspicion, I think that is another potentially indicator that a student may have used generative artificial intelligence services. Joyce, I feel like I kind of rambled a little bit. Did that get to
No,
your question?
that was helpful, but I guess when reporting it, say to your office, either as a warning or as a proposed sanction, would you still suggest that we use the wording, like this was very different from your other writing samples, and And, the reference systems were also inaccurate. And we submitted it to this tool, which identified, well, because we always say in previous times, we submitted it to Safe Assign, and it was this much overlap with this particular source, right? I mean, those are the kinds of words we use. So I guess I'm looking for the kinds of words we need to use in this instance.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Joyce. To start us off, I just dropped another link in the chat. This is to our website of guidance for reporting parties, so reporting instructors. There are two kind of drop downs that you all will see if you click this link. One is submitting a charge of academic dishonesty, which is again what we spend the majority of our time talking about today. But then the second drop down is talking to students about academic integrity. This is that guidance that I was mentioning on how to talk about students who you might suspect for an alleged violation. So Joyce, to the point that you made, yes, please be as direct as you are comfortable being with those students in a non-accusatory, in as much non-accusatory way as possible. So we like to give the guidance of starting off the conversation by, I have some concerns about a recent assignment and would like to have a conversation with you about it. Generally, I'll right off the bat, please walk me through your process for completing this assignment and just open up the floor to them to let them kind of talk about what sources they might have used or how they went about finding sources. And then, their potential process for writing the assignment of, I have an outline. Here's the outline that I created. And here's how I used the outline to generate the actual content for the paper. And here's a rough draft of the paper, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, in that conversation, if you still feel there is a concern, I encourage you to then say, I still have some concerns about this, based off what you shared with me. I'm going to go ahead and report this to Student Rights and Responsibilities. And here's, what I'm thinking in that regard. On the flip side of that, as we mentioned as well during the presentation today, if in that conversation, the student is able to present some exculpatory information, meaning the concern is now alleviated, the student was able to pull up oh, here's my outline, here's where I got this source, here's how I found this source, here's my rough draft, X, Y, and Z, then by all means, that can be the end of that. It does not need to get reported to SRR if the concern is alleviated. Any other questions, concerns, comments, thoughts? Something I did not spend a lot of time talking today, but this came up in a previous question. Thank you again, Sarah. There have been some changes to the Code of Academic Integrity that went into effect again on August 15th, 2023, so about a month ago. One of those being the warning process that we described a minute ago. And for more kind of nuances about the warning process, I'm dropping one more link in the chat. And that's just a process overview from start to finish and all its different kind of avenues one could potentially go down in this process. Another big change in the Code of Academic Integrity is just matching our current practice to written language found in the code now of rights that will be afforded to the responding student in an academic integrity panel, like the right to present information, relevant information as they see fit, a right to be accompanied by a support person if they choose to do so, which is already in the code, but we've added some kind of more guidance there about having a support person. And then also another minor change in the Code of Academic Integrity is just very nuanced rewording of the definitions of cheating and plagiarism. To the context of Joyce's question, we've removed references to another person or another human in regards to doing some ethically dubious things with the work of another person, to include concerns of the use of generative artificial intelligence. Thank you for letting me go down that rabbit hole as well. I see another hand. Patricia.
Yes, thank you. And also, I just want to thank Aaron. We had a student in a course that I teach for graduate students, and I'm sorry, I'm from Libraries and Academic Innovation. So we work a lot with Lori, and we are heading right into the questions about ChatGPT and other generative AI. We had a student who was clumsily cheating. She when I talked to her, so Aaron was very helpful in terms of just calming me down after being kind of taken aback that someone had just been so obviously plagiarizing. And when I presented her with the details that actually one of our educational developers, Robin, who's on this call, presented me with, she just said, no, someone suggested I use it, so I used it. But I have so I just want to make a plug for your office, and I know that you, along with us, are trying to learn about the extent and what people are using it for. We are offering some sessions this fall with conversations around this sort of developing situation. And I also know the Faculty Senate is working to refine policy. But my question to you is Erin, do you have a good sense of how aware our students are about GW's policy, and also just about your office? Could it be also that they are wondering about what's happening at GW?
So that's a really great question. Thank you so much for that, Patricia. I appreciate it. And I hope you were here a few minutes ago. I appreciate the kind of seamless plug. I also mentioned libraries and academic innovation to the start of a previous question. So thank you so much for that seamless plug. And thank you for your compliment a minute ago. I would say generally students are typically aware that there is at least a process afforded to them facing a potential allegation of dishonesty. My office does like to get in front of students as well as instructors about our process and again, rights afforded to responding students. With the takeaway, again, as I mentioned to you all a few minutes ago, if you all have one takeaway from today, that being how and why to report violations to my office, but then more specifically, please just connect with us to see if one of your students that you might be concerned with have prior violations. That's a big kind of center point that I will focus on of how and why to report violations, so we can connect those potentially repeat violations. With that, what we tell our students, the one takeaway we hope they walk away from a session with us is that there is a process for them facing a matter of dishonesty. It's not just a unilateral process between their instructor and them. There is, a resource here on campus that will kind of act to oversee the process afforded to them. As well, each individual academic unit, I want to also shout out the Militant Institute School of Public Health. They have created their own academic integrity module. I don't know the medium they do that through. It's not Blackboard. It's through another kind of online service platform. They've created their own academic integrity module that they've asked for feedback on. And that has been a sanction that instructors in the Militant Institute School have recommended that the student facing the matter of dishonesty do that module again as a result of the alleged dishonesty. So each individual academic unit also has done some unique things. So I want to take a second to appreciate that as well. As well, in addition to when we get asked to do presentations to specific groups, as I mentioned, we do take those requests as well, with the hope that they take away that there's a process. This past August, we also presented to the incoming class at New Student Orientation about not only the Code of Academic Integrity and its nuances, but also the Code of Student Conduct as well, to talk about some behavioral concerns. Again, just with the takeaway that there is a process afforded to them for matters of dishonesty, as well as some behavioral concerns. That was a very general response to the general question. Did that get to what you were asking, Patty? Awesome.
Can I add two things to what you just said?
Yeah.
One is that Allison McGuire, who's on this call, recently collaborated with some folks from LAI to revise or to build a quiz for our students to do during orientation regarding academic integrity. And so I think for most of our programs, the students do, Allison can talk more specifically, but do the quiz online during their orientation period. But if it's later in a course, or if you suspect all the students didn't do it, it's a Blackboard quiz. It could also be added to any course if you just reach out and contact us. The other thing. was Aaron. I
Right.
wanted to ask about recording something for online students. You said you talked to incoming freshmen, but we have a lot of online and distance students and graduate students. And so maybe we can talk offline later about recording something from your office to provide to those students.
Yes, that sounds great. I'll go really quick if I can follow up on that, Lori. I also want to shout out Allison. Allison, my memory is not the best. But Allison, you also have reached out to me in the past about an academic integrity module that you all are doing. So thank you so much for that. Apologies that I did not shout you out as well on this call before I shouted out another academic unit. So thank you so much for your work and your partnership with that. And Lori, yes, we would love to collaborate in that way. I'm recognizing again, graduate students are a very a big population here at GW. That would be great, and I think maybe tailoring that to some specific concerns about specific programs within SMHS or SMHS in general, I think would also be beneficial. Going back to a question we had earlier.
Great, thank you. And I
Yeah.
think Joyce has her hand up again.
Yeah, sorry to monopolize a bunch of time here, but yes. And Aaron, you and I have actually had conversation around this before. But one of the concerns that has emerged for all academic leaders of programs is particularly on behalf of adjunct faculty who often feel a little bit, ill at ease on the periphery, and now they've brought forward this charge, and if the student grieves it and is allowed, as they should be, to make their case often involves sometimes a very vitriolic attack on the person who assigned the grades. And I think our adjuncts are just unprepared for that, feel targeted by that, feel threatened by that. And I know it's happened in our program, as you know, and I think it's happened elsewhere as well. And I know that that's not strictly under the jurisdiction of your office, but it is I think probably a concern of many of us on this call. And I'm wondering if at least your office could prepare the adjunct when you're preparing them for their appearance, that sometimes happens during this meetings. I don't know if you can speak to that. Maybe there's nothing more you can say than what we've already said together, but if you could speak to that.
Well, Joyce, thank you so much for that, and I want to thank you for engaging with me in my office in the ways that we did last academic year to talk about that situation and its ins and outs. I will say anytime a student either requests an academic integrity panel hearing because they want to contest the violation or the recommended sanction, or again that recommended outcome by the instructor includes separation from the institution, we would move forward with an academic integrity panel. And prior to that, we do send notices to the reporting instructor and the student, obviously not only to let them know when that proceeding will be and how to join that, virtually or in person. We also link some, and kind of give some guidance on the structure of the proceeding, as well as we plug and link resources to our website. One of the links that I dropped in our chat about the process overview should be in those notices. Just kind of a point-by-point kind of sequential step of what will happen in the hearing. And what to expect. I will say, Joyce, to the point that you made a minute ago, the student does have, a right to respond to an allegation in the way that they see fit, right? That is also relevant to the matter at hand, right? That's kind of the caveat there. Additionally, I will say something that my office is looking at doing as well, in a recent update to the Code of Academic Integrity. So in the fall of 2022, we added guidance that says in the code, SRR will publish a timeline for when both the reporting instructor and the responding student can submit documentary information before the scheduled proceeding. So in a very similar fashion of that, in a upcoming potential round of revisions to the code, my office is looking to add the line of publishing guidance, and I don't want to say rules, specifically rules of decorum per se, because we did not use the word decorum intentionally. But just guidance on how to carry yourself per se during the hearing, and if those rules are not adhered to, you know, kind of what steps we taken from there, of either, you know, taking a recess and kind of coming together with the case manager, or saying, like, you know, what you're sharing is not relevant to the facts of the case, like, please, like, share statements that are relevant to the facts of the case. And then from there, you know, either rescheduling the proceeding to a different day, muting the participant if they cannot, you know, get back to what's relevant, or also, you know, just removing the party from the proceeding itself and not inviting them back. So that is guidance we're looking to publish on our website, and just adding a line to the code stating, you know, this will be published on SR's website.
Thank you for that update.
Any other questions or concerns or points of discussion from anybody? I do want to say as well, backtracking to Joyce, the point that you made about adjuncts specifically, recognizing that adjuncts, you know, are, I'm going to say, spread thin. Additionally, considering, you know, they might have other opportunities external to the institution that they are obliged to keep as well. In the event that the reporting instructor, adjuncts included, and full-time instructors included as well, if they are unable to or unwilling to address the case moving forward, but there is still a concern of academic dishonesty, then the department chair or other comparable official within the department or the academic unit can step in and act as the instructor for the purposes of the hearing.
Thank you so much, Erin, for joining us and sharing all this information. Thank you to our friends from LAI, and thank you to all the health sciences faculty and staff who've joined us. Please always reach out if you have, you know, things come up after, different things you think of later on, questions, concerns. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all so much for your time today. I appreciate it.